But what happens when the path itself disappears? What happens when the thing you have been patiently waiting for is no longer the right thing? When the plan you committed to no longer matches the world you are standing in? Adaptability is probably the most misidentified virtue in the framework. People think it means being flexible, going with the flow, adjusting on the fly. But that's not what adaptability is, at least not the way I think about it. True adaptability is the ability to change direction without losing yourself, to pivot without abandoning your values, to let go of a plan while holding on the principles that made the plan worth pursuing in the first place. All right, welcome back to the Transferable Everything podcast. This week, we're going to be talking about adaptability. So we're going to start off in the same fashion that we did last time, and I'm going to read an overview from the chapter, and this will sort of set the foundation for the rest of our discussion, really. So adaptability. Last week, we spent our time talking about patience, about staying when staying feels like nothing, about trusting a process that gives you nothing back, and that matters. Patience is essential. But what happens when the path itself disappears? What happens when the thing you have been patiently waiting for is no longer the right thing? When the plan you committed to no longer matches the world you are standing in? When the person who made the plan is no longer the person holding it? That is a different test entirely, and it's one that patience alone cannot solve. Adaptability is probably the most misidentified virtue in the framework. People think it means being flexible, going with the flow, adjusting on the fly. But that's not what adaptability is, at least not the way I think about it. True adaptability is the ability to change direction without losing yourself, to pivot without abandoning your values, to let go of a plan while holding on the principles that made the plan worth pursuing in the first place. And here's where it gets uncomfortable. Adaptability often asks you to release the very thing that got you here. The strategy that built the business, the identity that carried you through the last chapter, the strength you were most proud of. There are moments in life where the quality that saved you becomes the obstacle blocking you, where the tool you have been reaching for instinctively is no longer the right tool for the terrain. Grit got you through the wall, but what if the wall is no longer the problem? What if the problem is that you are still pushing against something that requires you to turn? Mike Tyson said, "Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face." He was not dismissing planning. He was naming a truth most people learn too late. The world does not hold still while you execute your strategy. Circumstances shift, information changes. The opponent you prepared for is not the opponent standing in front of you. And rigidity in the face of new reality is not strength. It's a slow form of defeat. This connects to something we have been building toward across the last few episodes. Grit asks you to endure this. Patience asks, can you trust this? Adaptability asks, can you release this? 3 different questions, 3 different muscles. And the wisdom is knowing which one the moment requires. Because the person who grits through everything burns out. The person who waits through everything misses the turn. And the person who adapts to everything loses their center. The virtue is in the discernment. There's a beautiful line from Heraclitus that I open the chapter with. No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river, and he is not the same man. That's not just philosophy. That's the operating reality of every transition you will ever face. In this chapter of the book, we talk about how I've learned about adaptability through my body, through my injuries, through becoming a parent, through scaling a business. Every one of those domains forced me to release something I was holding on too tightly, a version of myself that no longer matched the conditions, a strategy that no longer served the reality, an identity that no longer fit the person I was becoming. And the hardest part was never the pivot itself. The hardest part was admitting the pivot was necessary. We're also going to talk about where adaptability shows up in our everyday life. In parenting, where your children grow faster than your playbook. In business, where the market does not care about your plans. In relationships, where the person you married is not the same person sitting across from you 10 years later. And neither are you. They're not dramatic pivots, they're quiet recalibrations, and they require the same virtue. I want to be clear about something before we start. Adaptability is not the abandonment of your values. It is the application of your values in a world that refuses to stay still. The foundation does not change. The village does not change. What changes is which house needs attention, which path you take through the basement, and which version of yourself the moment requires. The oak that cannot bend is the first to shatter in the hurricane. Real strength is not rigidity. It is the ability to adjust without losing who you are. So it's interesting that it used the river metaphor, because I think we've spent a lot of time talking about that one. But I think adaptability has a lot of applicability across a lot of the virtues. But what's interesting is it's one of the ones that I think a lot of people struggle with the most is adapting. Either it's adapting their way of thinking,
Right.
the plans they set out to, whether it's their ambition, whether it's their day-to-day plans, whether it's adapting to the level of progress they anticipated in a given endeavor. There's so many variations of adaptability, and I think it's really important to learn how to be okay with having to pivot.
Yeah.
And I really recognize it's a challenge. So I think there's a lot of value that we can add during this podcast episode. Not just talking about it in general, but why it's important. I don't even know if there's a tactic of how to get better at it,
Right.
other than practicing it. But the most important thing, I think, is just understanding why it's important.
Sure. There was a lot in there I thought was really cool. In terms of it being a virtue, I haven't spent a whole lot of time thinking about adaptation, adaptability in that way. So there's certainly a lot here that is going to be new for me and cool to explore.
Yeah.
I think in the past I could frame it in two ways, which is I think about adaptability or adaptation and whether or not we consider those things the same thing. With adaptation being your ability to be exposed to a recurring stimulus and then change in a way that allows you to deal with that better and better over time. You mentioned something in there that I liked a lot, which was changing direction or if you're always in a state of adaptation or needing to adapt, you lose your center.
Yeah.
And I found myself stuck in that place.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's out of necessity. You're in an environment where you have no choice but to adapt. It's either adapt or fail in that moment, but it could very well be the case that adaptation means you fail a little farther down the line and you're just postponing failure.
Yeah.
So I know when we were talking about patience and decision-making as well, I had spoken a lot about slowing down wherever possible. And I think that can help you better decide when adaptation is actually necessary.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, and, a lot of the virtues overlap, even though we're sort of running them in this cyclical framework, one after the other. We'll continue to have to revisit different virtues at different stages. So there is a decision-making component built into being adaptive to your surroundings. That's part of the decision-making. The order we put them in is more thinking of like one single use case all the way through.
Right.
It'd be too complex. It'd look more like a spider web rather than a flow chart otherwise. So it is a bit of an oversimplification in some senses.
Yep.
And I think that's worth acknowledging and recognizing. So slowing down, it's driving. If we think of driving as the metaphor, you think you're going straight. And if you're going too fast, you might miss the turn. That's necessary. Not that you're going off a cliff on the other end, some extreme, but
Sure.
there is an aspect, like you're saying, about moving slower with intention, meticulously, and being able to adapt. It's fundamental in so many things that we do. And I think this is where transferable everything kind of is intended to show up, is really trying to sit in experiences that can be turned into lessons, principles, and underlying truths that show up in other parts of our lives and that we can have access to. So we always use the sports of we always use the example of collegiate sports. Most people play some sport at a recreational or collegiate level. And pretty much every sport, you might begin that sport, that game, with a game plan, with your team, as an individual. But really everything comes down to how you adapt that game plan during the play. And so we can recognize it there, but then in our own lives, we add, I think, an incredible amount of rigidity, too much even. And that's what makes it so hard for us to adapt. And I think this is where the intentional thinking and analysis comes in. It's like we can understand it in sport, but we fail to understand it in our own lives.
Right.
It's equally applicable there as it is in our day-to-day. We might set out our objective is to achieve this. And that might make sense, but then new information comes to light.
Right.
That tells us we might have to adapt. And I think the challenge probably is in being able to differentiate within ourselves, like, am I quitting or like because I'm being weak, or should I be adapting? Should I be pivoting? Is it because I lack grit or courage to face this obstacle, and not being able to discern those things within ourselves? And that's where like the wisdom piece comes in.
Right.
But I think you can only build that through enough reflection, through enough self-analysis, through enough talking to people within your support system and analyzing those things. And then it's the repetition of getting good at that selection, choosing the right tool for the right job at the right time. And I think that's where this virtue becomes the most challenging, is it maybe requires the most wisdom out of all of them.
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you don't have the experience or the wisdom to draw on when you meet an intersection where you may have to adapt or you're faced with a problem, it goes back to what we've discussed previously. You might make the wrong choice.
Yeah.
And choosing not to adapt is still a choice.
Yeah.
I also wanted to pull back one thing where I was talking about patience and taking the time that's afforded to you. Just wanted to note that it's also, time is relative. The speed at which you can do something is relative. So if I am personally faced with a momentary decision that I have to make, obviously I have to adapt in some way, shape, or form. But if we're speaking business or broader dynamics, like larger structures, I can have the intent or make the decision to start to adapt, but the amount of time it takes to actually adapt on that scale is a little longer than the immediate term,
Sure.
if you catch what I'm getting at.
I think so. The way I understand it is you're saying is like, because of the conditions necessary to adapt, it'll take longer?
Yeah, so let's say we faced a roadblock in the industry and we had to make some changes internally.
Okay.
We have so many stakeholders, so many employees.
Right.
It's much bigger change than me just saying, I personally, James, need to do something a little different to get the result that I think I need.
Right. Yeah. And those I guess are the conditions of working within a team, in an organization, rather than individually. Although ironically, like I was saying before, it seems like at an individual level, we struggle more with adaptability, and it's easier for us in a team environment in many ways.
Yeah, do you think that's because it's easier to, I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but to call shots? I mean, if you're an employee and someone with authority says we do it this way, then you're like, oh, okay, the decision's been made. This is how we do things. Where
I think so.
There's an immediacy with yourself. You know, you're completely responsible. You own all of it.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's why we've had decision making as like a key, like its own chapter.
Right.
Is because there's an underdeveloped skill set there to make good decisions. And I think a lot of us, more generally, we're happy to leave it up to other people to make those decisions. And then, we might complain about it or say, well, like, this sucks. I don't want to adapt. I don't like change. You hear that all the time. I hate change. I hate change. I hate change.
Sure.
And yeah, of course, change that's unnecessary can be frustrating.
Yeah.
But in most cases, there's a lot of good that can come from change.
Sure.
Which is a form of adaptation. We're changing the way we're doing something. We're changing something about ourselves. We're changing the way we look at something.
Right.
And at the very least, even if it's not a positive outcome, changing something will teach us something new. It'll give us new information.
Right.
Which maybe down the road becomes something that helps us in a way that we can't currently imagine understand something that might have become a huge roadblock.
Right. Yeah, and in thinking about it, as you said, it does seem to be the case that adaptability has a massive amount of crossover of requirement from the other virtues we've already discussed in order to be deployed.
Yeah, in a way, it's almost like you have to circle back to the beginning of the framework before you decide which new direction you go or whether going in a new direction is required. You sort of have to cycle back, go back through, because you're evaluating potential options. I think one of the things I didn't quite mention is how do you create the conditions in your thinking process, in your life, where you're able to see multiple opportunities or options to change. So I think some people probably wait till they hit the wall a million times that we talked about going through, and then they're like, okay, this isn't working. Let me look for something else.
Yeah.
Or is there a way before you get to the wall, as you're approaching, you're sort of scanning left and right, and you're becoming very aware of, okay, there is the wall, but here's some other options. And sort of determining, nope, the wall's the best option. I'm going to apply grit, and I'm going to break right through as you approach it. Or, you know what? That doesn't seem like the best case. There's a doorway over there. I'm still going to get to the other side of this wall. I'm just going to move this way temporarily and then kind of go through that doorway. I'm still on the other side, but it's maybe a more efficient, economical way to get there rather than having to deploy the same resource every time.
Right.
And so I think that's one thing that we didn't quite get to is sort of like, what are the conditions within yourself to be able to scan and see everything before you actually get to that obstacle?
Right. It's there's a lot of things.
Yeah.
And we've discussed like the hierarchy of importance of some of these things. And I think depending on the place you find yourself, the broader context certainly informs what's most important when it comes to being adaptive. So like, for instance, humility, I think, is of extreme importance when it comes to adaptability, particularly if you're moving between frameworks you're unfamiliar with, or even in a framework you are, because you need to question yourself. Am I making the correct decision? Is there data I'm not taking into account? And so on. So I would see that as being very, very important in terms of adaptability. But to be fair, the same could be said for all of them. I think we could probably choose one of them and speak throughout this why it's important for adaptability and work our way down the list. I'm sure we'd have dozens of reasons for each of them.
Yeah. I think there's something about a level of awareness. Now, in later chapters, we get to self-awareness. And I don't mean self-awareness. I just mean a general awareness. And I'm trying to think of how this might fit, because I don't think it's discussed currently in the book, really. So On the approach to the obstacle, whatever's in front of us, because there always will be an obstacle in our way towards our goal, whether it's ourself, whether it's, an external factor, a lack of a resource, some sort of obstacle. We have to have our eyes open and creating this awareness, observing the conditions around us and sort of evaluating them
Right.
as we're moving. And I think maybe one of the things people become too fixated on it is, here's the goal. I'm putting on my horse blinders and I'm just running towards that thing.
Right.
And I'm sure there's scenarios where that's effective. I have instances in my life where that's effective. Like it's pretty clear where the goal is. The scenario is there's not a lot of external factors coming in, and it's just get to that destination at all cost. But determining what's that and what's sort of here's a broader goal. This happens a lot, I think, in more open-ended scenarios like business, for example, or parenting, or long-term style goals. Short-term, you might be able to put on those horse blinders. But as you're moving towards it, the world around you is changing. I think that's where the river metaphor returning is good. Is you're changing, and the world around you is changing as you approach each obstacle being the river. And so I think last time when we used the river metaphor, we talked about approaching the river, and even if you're the same, the river might be different.
Right.
The rocks might not be there and it's soft sand underneath, or vice versa. Now there's rocks. And so the conditions in the river has changed. Maybe the river, the water level has risen and you can't walk through so easily, or
Right.
the water's moving quicker. In your approach to the river, that's where I think as you're getting closer, you don't have to get to the river as fast as possible and then just stop and then say, okay, what am I going to do? And make your decision from there.
Right.
As you're approaching, you can be intentionally analyzing everything that's unfolding in front of you. At a distance, I can see the water's moving faster. Okay, that's a new data point. Okay, I can see that the river bank has eroded. Okay,
Right.
that's a new data point. And recognizing that because everything is changing, my thinking has to be always evolving. I have to be aware of everything around me and analyzing and internalizing all of these new data points,
Right.
and what that might mean for me. And so I think that's probably something that I'm going to end up revisiting in not even just this chapter, but the whole book. Is like, is there a general awareness about data and what we do with the data?
Right.
And I think that's a big part of it, because before you ever get there, you could be preparing yourself to adapt, and without just showing up and being like, okay, obstacle, is it grit, or am I going to wait a minute? Is it going to be patience, or am I going to walk, down the flank of the river until there's a nice crossing point?
Sure.
You can analyze those things long before you get there.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that we've spoken about undercurrents. That all day, every person is always adapting, but it might just be with more mundane things. So I go to take a step, I'm correcting. There's stuff that's happening automatically, but
Right.
there's adaptations that are happening in real time. There's I have a couple thoughts that are trying to converge, so I'm going to try to tease this out.
Okay.
But we could speak to, and I'm probably going to apply this incorrectly, but Newton's third law, which is that every action has an equal or opposite reaction. And therefore, we need to appreciate that everything, to a degree, is alive or in motion or being acted upon in some way. And that, so if I approach the river, water is moving rocks. Things are being changed by the conditions of movement and the motion of life broadly. But because of that, it can look the same to me, but things certainly have changed. So I need to drop the assumptions that I have.
Right.
So I don't know if what I'm getting at is there needs to be a foundation of appreciating that everything is always being acted upon. So we can't assume that it's going to be the same.
Right. And I think that's where Mike Tyson's quote comes into play, right? Is like, and this is why I think sports is so great for this. In his case, he used boxing. Like, everyone can understand that getting punched in the face would suck.
Right.
So you walk into the boxing ring, you've got a plan. This is what I'm going to do. And then all of a sudden, the person hits harder than you could have imagined.
Right.
And your whole plan's gone. Or what you thought would work is no longer going to work.
Sure.
The same thing is true for soccer players on the soccer field, for, I would argue, every sport. And it's your ability to adapt that becomes so key. And I think if we bring it back to what I was saying at the beginning, this is one of the things that's made me obsessed with the idea of transferable everything, is in a domain like athletics, there's really beautiful lessons to be learned that apply directly into pretty much every aspect of your life. Yet I think we fail to learn them or bring them with us intentionally. And, anyone who's played soccer, even for fun, you might have gone out and your coach, I'm trying to think like the most recreational style. So your coach
I got
says,
some insights.
perfect. So your coach says, James, you're going to be striker today.
What does that mean, coach?
And so you go out there and, he thought you would be a great striker. Turns out, not so much.
Right.
But based on their striker moving you into a defensive position, right? Maybe the thing that you bring to the team, the asset that you bring is that your IQ of the game, even at a recreational level, is just higher than your peers. But you're not as fast.
Right.
Right. So they have a pretty strong defense, and your IQ on the pitch up against them isn't the right thing to counteract what their defense is good at. So what the coach decides at halftime is, we're going to put in a striker that's faster than you, and we think that's what's going to get past them. But they have a really quick striker, and although you're not the fastest, you can anticipate whatever they're trying to do. So we're going to put you on defense. Like, you might have gone into the game mentally prepared to be a striker, and all of a sudden you find yourself as a defender, like polar opposite ends of the pitch. You have to adapt to that, even at a recreational level. New position. And that's applying some intent and tactics from a coach who's at a recreational level, often a parent.
Right.
So it might even be as simple as like, well, we're just going to rotate positions for everybody. Like, you have to adapt. New position, new set of responsibilities, new type of contribution in each position to the team and the broader goal. Yet, off the pitch, outside of that domain, we struggle with that. So there's a part of it that's the decision making, but then there's the part of it of just the outlook on being adaptive. Of, I don't like it. Whereas someone recreational might be like, yeah, I like the opportunity to try new positions. But then in their own personal life, might be like, no, I don't want to try this new job. I don't want to experience this new thing. I don't want to go to this new place on vacation because I'm accustomed to this place over and over and over and over again.
Sure.
And like, to some degree, that makes sense at times. But it kind of puts us into a bit of a box. And we fail then to learn what experience can teach us.
Yeah. There are always going to be constraints. Going to your sports example, I have to imagine the decision-making that's happening at a higher level is much more strategic.
Yeah.
Where in the recreational level, there's the added constraint of, I can't always be strategic in the choices that I'm making. Sometimes it's just every person gets 5 minutes of playtime or whatever the case may be. And so, like you said, we're rotating. The coach can't be as adaptive in that scenario, but the player does have to be. But I guess what you're getting to is what prevents somebody from being able to adapt when put into that situation, or what allows someone to excel when it comes to adapting.
Right.
Okay. I think a lot of that has to do with people getting hung up on their expectations of what an outcome is going to be.
So would you say then, and this could be pretty important, is not just adapting tactically or on the journey, but adapting what your expectations of the outcome might look like. So you went in with this game plan. That game plan might even be relevant, but the outcome that you expected you might have to adapt to what that is going to look like. Because the original thing you thought it could look like, whatever that outcome would be, no longer exists.
Sure, or it's a different version, or I thought I was going to get there a different way, and I'm so hung up on this methodology. But I can't control every variable. I don't get to make every decision. So if you appreciate or understand that that's the case, I don't know, I feel that would make it easier to be someone who has a capacity for adaptation.
Yeah. And I think it's sort of like
I don't know, it's being realistic. You know, you're not going to be able to control everything at all times. You can put your best foot forward and try to do so, but, you know, in a workplace, I don't get to make every decision. People override me. In a team environment, I don't get to make every decision, and I shouldn't, because I don't have the best answer at all times. Sometimes you have to relinquish that decision-making control as well. And I also know that I can't expect an outcome to result from a specific action, even though it's happened before. It may inform my decision-making, but if I'm so hung up on something going a certain way and it doesn't happen, am I going to dwell more on the fact that it didn't work out the way I wanted it to, or am I going to pivot and make the productive choice?
So it sounds like there's an ongoing theme there, which is a level of control, relinquishing the level of control you have
I'd say
within your circumstances. Sure. It sort of reminds me of it's a bit akin to the idea of we talked about truth. So being so committed to truth that you don't care, you're not tied to your opinions. You're not tied to the things that you might say if sharing your opinions. And you're on a genuine journey for discovering what's true. Not that you're right, but what is true, whether you were the one that said it or somebody else was. It seems similar to that in the sense that, like, the same person that wants what they say to be right is the same person maybe that is sort of stuck with, struggling to adapt. Because you kind of need a level of adaptation in your thinking to be open to what's true.
Right.
And so maybe the same person that's open to what's true for truth's sake alone is also the same person to say, this is where I'm trying to go, and I'm going to adapt to the scenarios and the conditions as they show up.
Right.
And I'm just okay with that. Just the same way as I'm okay with not being right. I'm okay with not being married to my ideas. It's just simply what's true is true. And what it's going to take for me to get to this objective, whether it's my original plan or it's a completely different version that someone had to help me with to achieve,
right,
I still am reaching my destination.
Yeah, and it's so unproductive to be hung up on wanting something to go a certain way, and that resulting in inaction or failure because you're unwilling to deviate from what you want. So to like a really silly example, I'm trying to organize a night out with some friends, and I am dead set on going to a particular restaurant because I want this dish. And then we're out, whatever, let's say we go to the movies or something, and everyone's like, yeah, we're gonna go get dinner afterwards. And they all agree that they want to go somewhere that's not the place that I wanted to go. Am I just gonna go home? Am I not going to eat? Oh, what is the response to that?
A funny example of this is I got a lot of kickback when I was responsible for a friend's bachelor party. You were in attendance.
Right.
And so you might recall this. There was virtually no plans. There was no agenda. And for a lot of people, that was sort of jarring. What do you mean there's no plans? Like, we knew roughly we were going to go to this geographical location. We were going to get something to eat. We were going to do something fun. We were going to go maybe to a bar, whatever the case may be.
Sure.
But we didn't need to pick which bar.
Right.
We didn't need to pick which activity, which restaurant. We were in a place where they were there in abundance. Let's go. Let's get everyone together in the same location, and we'll figure it out.
Right.
And the night was pretty fluid. It worked out pretty nice. And there was no constraint. If we wanted to stay longer at one location, we could before going to the next. We weren't constrained by the conditions we set for ourselves.
Right.
We could just have fun and enjoy everything and get to where we need to go when we would like to get there.
Right.
And everything worked out. And for most people, even when I tell that story, a lot of people are like, you had no agenda? What do you mean? Like, you can't have a bachelor party without an agenda, without just setting everything up. Why not?
Right.
And that's kind of, in many cases, my outlook on most things. The objective was to have fun,
Sure.
to spend time together, and to celebrate the person getting married. The objective was not to get to this restaurant for this particular dish,
Right.
this bar,
Sure.
because someone recommended it. It was just those things. All those things were met, agenda or no agenda.
Yeah.
And that's an interesting example.
Yeah, it's all to say and this is dependent on the stakes. Obviously, these examples are a little frivolous in a way. Not to say that the bachelor party was unimportant, but it's okay to let go of your expectations and give yourself up to the moment, to be grounded and take things as they are and respond to them as they act upon you.
Find the world as it is, not as you wish it was.
Sure.
And yeah, I think that's critical. And there's a humility to that. There's a submissiveness in a way that might feel a little counterproductive because, and that's where the fine line is. It's not saying to be submissive that you just sort of go with the wind. And that's why talking about the values is important. You're still meant to be centered on your values. And that's hard, I should say, to be so adaptive while holding the strength in the center of the values.
Right.
That's hard. And it's easy to make the mistake to deviate from that. And I think that's why this is so important, is to talk about it so you understand, okay, I'm going to be adaptive. I'm going to be submissive to the conditions as I find them.
Yeah.
But here's my line in the sand. I'm not going to cross this. These are the things that are important to me, and these are the things that I'm going to hold true.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely critically important not to let those things cave because, as I said earlier, if you're adaptive to everything and you lose your center, that there's more work in finding yourself again.
Yeah.
And then resetting and then working forwards.
For those that find themselves in that place, if you ever find yourself where you've had to adapt, whether you intended to or life created the conditions where you adapted and you don't even know how you got here and you're sort of there, the best way to figure out where to go next is to begin with yourself, to refine your core, the virtues, the character, the things that are important to you, and put those back at the forefront. Hold that line and really make sure that that you're not compromising on any of those things. We get to this later in alignment, but that's so critically important. And then from there, you can get back to figuring out, okay, where am I? How do I get to where I want to go next? How do I adapt to the conditions in front of me? So for anyone lost, that's where you begin, without question. And that can be a hard thing. And to be fair, that's why everything in this framework begins with courage, humility, and working through that for the individual, for yourself. It has to begin inside of you. Okay, so I won't tie it to anybody because there's so many people that have said this. But I think it's true nonetheless, and it is a bit of a stoic saying, to find the world as it is, not as you wish it was. And I think there's a lot inside of that. And if I take this back to one of the other episodes and a constant theme that we've talked about, which is the education system more broadly. Let's say we had one class that covered philosophy. That statement in of itself would be, you could run multiple classes on just dissecting that, exploring where does that show up in your life. Yes, in athletics, in your relationships, in your job, if you have a part-time job while you're in school, in your goal setting. It just shows up in so many places and is so applicable that, when I think about business, for example, that's such a critically important statement for business. Yes, things like learning business finance is important, and learning some basic accounting if you're going to run a business, and operations, and all of these like technical skills are important. But how you apply those technical skills is at least in part based on how well you understand that statement, how well you understand the river metaphor.
Right.
And so it baffles me to some degree that there maybe isn't enough time spent. There's not enough, what would be the word? There's not enough weight given to this aspect. And I think that's one of the things that I want to accomplish most with Transferable Everything, is bringing these virtues back to the forefront,
Right.
back to the foundation. It begins with all of them. In the book, I added a metaphor, and it's used within it, and I'll share it here. So it's, imagine for a second that you're a village. You're a representative as an individual, as a village. And each building that sits on the surface of this village is a domain within your life. One represents relationships, one represents your profession, your education, and all of these different domains within your life. But each of them has a basement, and those basements are connected. And you've got plumbing, and you've got all of your services, electrical, everything's connected underneath. Well, if you can imagine that, and each basement is a virtue, and it's all built underneath, that foundation is what everything can be built on. Rather, if you imagine you just built a house directly on the surface, right? Nothing underneath. That's your technical mastery of something within a domain. The world has storms. You've got hurricanes, tornadoes. You've got all of these things that happen to us. That's beyond our control. That's finding the world as it is. We can't control these storms in many cases within our lives. And they might come and take out one of these buildings. But the thing that ends up lasting is the foundation built underneath.
Right.
It creates the conditions for you to rebuild or to move to another domain and bring everything with you and keep everything connected. And so like this undercurrent foundation of connectivity of all these virtues where, I restate, I don't think we spend enough time, resources, energy, and time on their development. Business is just one great example. Parenting's another. A lot of people read parenting books. How many people are reading self-development books, psychology for themselves, not to be a better parent? If you want to be a better parent, be a better person within yourself, and you start there, and that's kind of where everything begins. If you want to build a better business, work on yourself. Keep working on yourself so your business can continue to grow.
Right.
And anyways, I just thought it was important to kind of circle back to that same thing. Like, everything begins with yourself.
Sure.
Control the things you can control, because the world around you, you can't. And we try to, and I think that's where people struggle with that adaptability, is they're trying too hard to control the external.
Yeah, it seems to be that there's a balancing act happening where you have realism and then idealism.
Right.
And I do still think it's important to have ideals, but you need to ensure that those things are in check.
Yes.
And I think that's probably where teaching adaptability or teaching somebody I don't know if teaching is the right word, but encouraging someone more towards realism almost challenges their ideals, or it can. I think there's a possibility that that happens, and might make the individual less likely to move towards realism if they're feeling challenged. So I think I would draw that back to a sufficient level of humility being required to allow those ideals to be challenged fairly.
Yeah. And so I think that's where challenging them fairly, that's where things like the Socratic method can come in, and thinking philosophically. A lot of people still even will sort of like gasp at the notion of philosophy. And that's always, I've struggled to understand that, because it feels like everything begins with philosophy. And in the same way that it begins with virtue and character and the foundation, the undercurrents of principles and lessons that exist underneath everything. And I would just love to see, that exist more and you know, I'm often probably unfairly picking on the education system, because there's other places this can exist. We've talked about it before, like, you know, the dinner table and things like that.
Yep.
But also in athletics. If you're a coach of a sports team, you have a really wonderful opportunity, and maybe they need training on this, because it's likely the case that they don't have any, but to use that as an opportunity on the sports field to teach some of these virtues, to use Socratic questioning to help players understand these things. And you know, a lot of coaches are probably thinking, you know, well, like, how is this going to pay dividend in our upcoming game? You know, because they're results focused, which is great. But I think determining the results you want is part of being adaptive. So, for example, if you're a coach, what do you really want? Just like if you're a parent or a business leader, what is the thing that you really want? Do you want a bottom line number as a business? You want X profitability per quarter at the end of the year? Or is the thing that you want to build a meaningful business that can be of service to the world and of service to the people who work within your organization by creating opportunity, advancement, all of those things? Like, which one is the thing that you want? Same with being a coach. Do you want results week in and week out, and that's all you care about for your 12-year-olds? Or do you want to build great humans, and hopefully they become great players and results? Like, what's the order of priority?
Sure.
And that becomes something you have to tie everything back to. And I think that's where adaptability can come in. Using the small example, which I actually kind of want to use more, like the everyday example, like you said, is the thing you wanted to go have dinner with your friends, or was it to have this particular meal and by chance your friends can go with you? And then tying everything back to what's the original thing that you want. And it's easy to lose sight of, but I think it's really important. And if you hold on to that, adaptability can become that much easier.
Right.
Because the things that happen don't matter as much, because they probably don't impact the actual thing that you want, right? So if it's a business, you know, things are going to happen. Storms are going to come. Conditions are going to change. But, you know, even if you don't come anywhere near achieving your quarterly or end of year financial goals, if you still have a business, The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, if you're still in business, you're winning. And if your actual mission is to be of service and you're doing that, and not just for your customers, but also for the people who work for you, then you're winning. So everything else can become more okay, if that's true.
Right.
And I think for a lot of people, that is actually true. I don't think there's a lot of people out there that would say, like, I'm only in this for, you know, a quarterly earnings report and whatever. I don't think those people would last in business through the hardships. So I think most people actually want the things I'm describing, they just forget about it. It's how they started, and then it sort of got lost. And I think that's why going back to yourself is so important. It also brings you back to what is the thing you ultimately want.
Yeah, it's it's unfortunate because necessity, as we've said, does play a part there. And there's two things at odds. I'm again gonna draw on like the idealism realism duality, which is that I do want to invest in the people. I want to enrich their lives. However, if I'm not meeting these quarterly targets, I can't keep them employed.
Yes. Of course.
So I can have my ideals and I can want to reach for a certain standard or a certain quality, whatever that may be. But I also have to ground that in the reality that there are balance sheets and the numbers have to look good.
Yeah, of course. And it's not to deviate from that. And that's where I think we've, in more recent episodes, we've done a better job at this than maybe in some of the earlier ones of talking about the tension between opposing forces, or it feels like opposing forces.
Sure.
But they're not. It's reality versus ideals, objectives, whatever we're aiming towards.
Sure. I mean, I would have a very difficult time existing on this planet without some ideals.
Yeah.
Or some form of idealism. There's things you want to hope or aspire towards. But again, in order to get there or to really pursue those things, your decision making has to be grounded in reality, and you need to act with an understanding there's going to be a reaction, and it's always happening. It's constant action, reaction, observing new data, new decisions, and then you continue to push towards what you want.
Yeah. Now to hold on to that for a second, what you described, and I think this is where it becomes hard for some people, is that takes a lot of work.
Sure.
And I think we've said this before, but to be constantly analyzing everything that you just described, it's going to take work. And I don't know if it's that people don't want to put in the work, or maybe they just don't understand the necessity of that continuous work. It's sort of like, well, I go to work and work's work, and then parenting, if you have kids, that might be work. But everything outside of that, I just want to relax. I don't want to do anything. And I'm so appreciative of that, because I failed to do that enough in my own life. I have the opposite problem. Boo hoo hoo, but it's problems are problems.
Sure.
Whether either side of the spectrum that you're on.
Yep.
But I think it's finding the balance.
But surely a number of problems that you have intra-week or day-to-day exist because you're aspiring towards a certain ideal.
Yes, absolutely. And then by not aspiring towards an ideal is going to create its own set of problems.
Sure.
And so continuous tension, as we keep coming back to. It's why one of the most ancient symbols, the yin and the yang, exists. It's everything in our world.
Yeah.
Cause and effect.
There are going to be trade-offs.
Yeah.
With that said, apathy's a bitch.
Yes.
But yeah, there's always action reaction. There's always wants versus needs, and then there's apathy that's informed by any number of things. But it all comes down to what is in reach, what could be in reach if I did X, Y, and Z, and when I hit X or Y or Z, do I find then that I was wrong, and I need to recalibrate and reassess. But all of that comes from, I think, a desire to want to reach a certain thing. And goals are going to vary wildly from person to person. And I think it's important to discuss that. I mean, you posted a clip the other day of the two of us talking about the man crying in the Lamborghini, or the Ferrari, whatever it was, an expensive car.
Yeah.
Barring situations where there's generational wealth or you luck into money, there's a considerable amount of work and sacrifice it's gonna take to work towards something like that.
Yeah.
And you either want that or you don't.
Yeah. Now, I think sometimes people think it's what they want. And then they get there and realize you hear this all the time of people who achieve certain wealth. They get there and they're like, okay, I beat all the bosses.
Yeah.
There's nothing there for me at the end of this thing.
Right.
And so, but I think that's where these virtues come into play. And it's not to be like less ambitious, but it's to be present and have gratitude on the journey. It goes back to, it's not about the outcome, it's about the journey. And it's great to achieve outcomes, but it's just one of many outcomes on the journey. And the real gift is in the journey that you get to go on. And if you can sit in that, you can have gratitude for that, and you can appreciate it along the way, the moments where they don't pass you. This is something I've had to put a lot of time and attention on because, I've most of my life has been so goal orientated and goal focused. And, especially I had to get better at this when having kids because I don't want to be the entrepreneur that misses my children's childhood. And the trade-off might be being less financially successful than other entrepreneurs, which everyone that I've seen on a video has said they would take that in hindsight every single day. And I think that's one of the things that we also have to do as each next generation is learn from the previous ones. I think I might have said this before, but I think that's something that we've failed to do, I think, in many ways. Many aspects of society or technology continues advancement, building on the last iteration, V1, 2, 3, and it's picking up what it had and building on it. And I think sometimes within society we forget to do that, or within generations. We fail to learn the lessons the previous generation has learned. And that's something I've been hyper cognizant of, especially in my parenting. Every parent that I pass, when they see my kids, they say, almost all of them, they say universally, it's going to go way too quick. Make sure you enjoy it. And, I hold that deeply in my heart. Like, I have to really make sure that I do.
Sure.
And that's fundamentally changed me in the best way possible. And that's part of adaptability. I was once this way, being so hung up on goals and objectives within either my profession or sports or personal development or in the gym and performance, when now the thing that matters most is being present with my kids and my wife, my family. And that means other things will take a back seat.
Sure.
And so I had to be adaptive to that. The thing that served me before. It's no longer going to serve me now. It's actually antithetical to the outcomes that I actually want, which is above all else to be a particular husband and father.
Yeah. I mean, any individual needs to decide what it is they want and how bad they want it.
Right.
What are you willing to do to get there? Do you have to change your methodology?
Well, I think we might have talked about this before as well, but I think a lot of people get confused about what they want.
Sure.
They think like the Lamborghini or the Ferrari.
Yeah.
I think this is what I want.
Right.
Turns out it's not.
Yeah. I mean, like what can we reduce that down to? Is it, I want the thing because it demonstrates, it denotes my hard work at a glance. I've worked for this. This is a thing. Does it come down to status? Is it because I like automobiles? It looks cool. It's a nice toy. Why do you want that thing? Do you want it for a good reason? Is it going to bring you fulfillment? Is it temporary fulfillment? Is it lifelong fulfillment?
I think exploring the inner citadel is, and this is why, the the Stoics talked about this so much is because before you can, and this is kind of contradictory to the book even a little bit, before you can aim for anything, before you can set anything at your aim, you have to understand where your motives are coming from. So is it fear that's pushing you? Is it a chip on your shoulder? That you want this, I want this Ferrari because everyone told me I wouldn't be successful. So are you doing it for everyone else to show them?
Right.
Or is it because it's what you truly want in your heart? And I think a lot of people get stuck in not being able to discern those things within themselves. And I think that's why so much work needs to be done inside of us at an individual level.
Yeah.
So we deeply understand, what are our motives? Are we running from something or towards something?
Sure.
Is it the cat chasing the mouse, or is it the cheese? Which one? And sometimes the cat or running from something is a greater force towards something. And it becomes harder when it's the thing pulling us, because fear is maybe a greater motivator.
Right.
But at some point, and to be fair, in our life, it might begin with one and then change to the other, and understanding when those changes happen. But I would posit that where you can, not just understanding it, but also selecting the thing you ultimately want. The thing you want to run towards, not the thing you want to run from, is what will give you the most meaning and purpose in your life. If we were to think through Viktor Frankl's lens, in Man's Search for Meaning, the thing that gives you purpose and meaning is the thing you run towards, not from.
Right.
That's a hard thing to reconcile, even when you discover that, because it might force you to change your entire way of thinking, which means you have to completely adapt again.
Right.
It might change who you understand yourself to be, and again, you have to adapt. I thought I was this person. I'm happy to know now I'm not, but now I have to relearn what I know about me.
Right.
This is what, unfortunately, people who deal with trauma and uncover those traumatic parts of their life often have to deal with.
Sure. Even for people who have not gone through those types of things, I would say it was a hurdle in my experience when I have had to make broader, larger adaptations, to look at everything that had come before and to recognize what I had considered an investment at the time, and realize it's time to move on from that investment and reinvest somewhere else.
Right. And I think we all have moments like that. That happens professionally. That happens in athletics. You know, I see this a lot in the soccer world, is trying to determine when to move on from a team, a coach, and all of that. In relationships, when is it time to say, you know, I've tried.
Yeah.
This just doesn't work anymore, and it's time to move on. I think a lot of people struggle with that, even if we consider relationships, and you know, we've all had them, and I don't just mean romantic ones, I mean friendships as well, family relationships, where you have to say, like, you know, it's no longer serving me to be in this relationship. I no longer see it working. Maybe I was in it for the wrong reasons, and I understand that now.
Right.
With new information, a greater understanding of myself, and the responsible thing is then to move on. And I think a lot of people can confuse adaptability in this sense as well as like quitting.
Right.
And we've talked about this before, but pivoting or adapting to new information is not the same as quitting. Quitting is entirely different. Quitting is saying, I can't do this. I no longer believe that this is achievable, and I'm just going to stop. I'm going to give up. Pivoting or adapting to new information is repositioning the things that are important to you in a new priority order sequence, or still striving towards the same goal but taking a different path. There's different variations of that, but it's important to recognize. Now, I must concede, because I've struggled with this. One of the really hard parts of it is then determining if you do need to stop something or you need to give something up.
Yeah.
Is if you're being really critical of yourself, which is important, you can be, like all things, overly critical.
Yes.
And then say, with clear conscience, okay, I need to adapt, I need to make a change, I need to give this thing up, whatever. And then all of a sudden, that hypercritical voice in your head is saying, are you sure you're not just quitting? And then maybe you stay in this thing a little bit longer.
Right.
Because I don't want to be a quitter. And that reconciliation, that tension between those two things can be really challenging. And I think, the first thing that comes to mind is, that's where having amazing people around you, support network can come into play and help you discern that.
Sure.
I don't know, what else do you think could help you discern and figure out and sort of battle that tension? So it's a tough question.
Yeah.
So I apologize.
It is a lot. No, and I'm still kind of hung up on another thought. So I'm
cut
sorry.
that.
No. I was thinking about how I phrased it as an investment, and then I was thinking about, let's call it a poor financial investment.
Sure.
I don't make those. There's time happening regardless. There's a passage of time. And things are happening during that passage of time, whether it's a financial investment, whether it's a relationship. Sure, due diligence goes in to the initial decision to make an investment.
Yeah.
Or at least it should. But I mean, often that's organic when we're talking about real world, like relationships and stuff like that. I don't think everybody's as robotic as me and views the world through that lens. But if it's a failed investment, at the point of failure, like I said, it's a matter of determining when that point of failure was, right? Because at a certain point, you could be in it after that point of failure and you just haven't made the adaptation yet.
Yes.
So you're adapting too late.
Yeah.
But when you finally make that decision to move on and leave that investment behind, whether you've lost financially, whether you've lost someone in a relationship, there's still a lot that you have gained. And I think that speaks to some of like the foundational work of this book. But you're gifted an opportunity to do an after action on that investment.
Yeah.
And ask questions like, can I even learn from this? Surely you can, in all cases. But what was I paying attention to over the course of that investment? And what did I miss?
Yeah. I think that's where after action, reflection on all things is important. The simple, mundane things in our life, I think we talked about this last time, as well as big things, financial losses, a loss of a relationship, a potential promotion. It reminds me of the Good video by Jocko. Do you know this one?
Yeah. Dick fell off. Good.
Exactly.
Wife left you. Good.
Yeah. And I think there's an important part of, obviously that's an extreme.
Yeah.
And there's tensions to
Sure.
to rebalance everything. But being able to go to that place where you can think like that
Yeah.
for at least a period of time means, all right, this thing happened. Good is simply, and for those of you that don't know, Jocko put out this video called Good. I encourage everyone to look it up. It's basically like, everything went wrong in my life, good. Something I can learn from it. And I've shown that to my brothers. I've showed that to so many people that have been struggling, athletes, professionally, etc. And I think there is something important within it. Again, the tensions will bring things back to center, the yin and the yang. But being able to go into that space and say, okay, there's lessons here for me to learn. So that's good.
Sure.
There is something good that can come from it. Something good can come from everything. Doesn't mean it's good in of itself, but something good can be taken from it. Sort of the glass half full person, the sort of silver lining. Personally, I like to think in those terms a lot. I've been criticized that professionally.
Yeah.
I've been criticized about that professionally quite a lot. Something bad's happened. I'm like, all right, this is great. This is where we're going to go now. And maybe a little bit to a fault, but I think in many ways you have to, because if you can't go there, then you can't find something to learn from it.
Yeah. It's a cool video. And I agree. At the very least, I would say that being given an opportunity to experience something that you have to react to is a good thing. It presents an opportunity. Now, is everybody being thoughtful about what happens after that occurrence? I can't say for sure.
Sure.
And because of that, I can't always necessarily say it's a good thing.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't really have much more to add to that. It's just more to say, when extreme tragedy occurs, sure, you've gotten a learning experience if you want to look for the silver lining. In the more frivolous or less important examples, like my car broke down.
Totally.
Okay, I'm given an opportunity to respond to something difficult. It's maybe a medium inconvenience.
Yeah.
What does that opportunity present me?
Yes. Yeah, and of course, and I don't know Jocko, but I've read his books and watched his content.
Sure.
I'm sure he would, and I don't think he intentionally even made that video per se. I think it was like pulled from a clip.
Right.
But I think even he would say it's like generally an oversimplification.
Yeah, sure.
Of an outlook, but it's one that is an option, one to select at the right time. Because yes, for extreme tragedy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, for him, he's well, I don't know his full biography, but you can assume or guess at what the gentleman has gone through given his background, right?
Yeah.
I'm sure there have been levels of extreme tragedy that probably somebody who thinks like him and has experienced what he has was able to get something positive out of it.
Yeah.
Not everybody can do that.
Totally.
Now, can people find a way to be like him? Like, absolutely. But it doesn't happen immediately or without exposure or practice.
Yes, absolutely. And that's why the mundane examples of day-to-day life are so great. Spilled milk. Good. Okay, what did I do? Okay, I wasn't thinking clearly while I was trying to cut the top of the milk bag and I knocked it over. Next time, I should probably make sure I do that.
Yeah.
So the next time, it doesn't happen. Okay, something learned. But putting these things into practice is what's going to get you prepared for the inevitable challenge that maybe you wouldn't otherwise be prepared for. When I look at least for myself, the hardest things that I've been through, I've been somewhat fortunate that I've had sort of like incrementally more and more challenging things happen that have kind of prepared me for those. And I can't imagine having those big things happen had I not been prepared along the way.
Right.
So the good in some of the things that have happened to me that at the time felt tragic is that they prepared and increased my capacity for bigger things that were going to happen that I would have no control over.
Right.
And so that's sometimes we can intentionally practice things like, applying this way of thinking if you spill milk in the morning. And other times we're forced into it.
Yeah.
Simply by circumstance.
Sure.
By the world that's changing around us. I've got a good example of adaptability. And I don't want to get too much into, because it's in the book, so I don't want to take away from it too much. But I sustained injuries that impacted my body, and it sort of fundamentally changed everything about how I could exercise, should exercise, and so forth. And one of the biggest changes was I had to kind of relearn my body, my capacity to push through adversity physically, and in kind of a weird way, because it wasn't definitive. It was like, and like most things, you could have good days and you could have bad days. And so one of the things for me was I used to kind of try and structure a workout routine, now often performance-based because it was sport or military focused. But it was like, okay, on this day I'm doing this day I'm doing this day I'm doing this. And that served me for many, many, many years. After injuries, I had to kind of go back and rethink how I could do things, because I would show up to the gym or to do whatever, and my body was not in a good place. And so I had to learn to adapt even something so simple, which I can say was extremely challenging because it had served me so well for so long. And so the thing was, now most of my workout routines, to be fair, are kind of how I'm feeling that morning when I show up to the gym. And I think injury aside, like, this is probably something that most people might consider as they're getting older and they're dealing with sort of like, not a big injury, but sort of like the injuries that are years past that are starting to act up in their older age. And so forth.
Auto-regulation.
Yeah. And that was a really tough one for me. And I think it's a good example because I was very rigid, and that served me for a very specific reason. And I thought I had to stay that way. And it took a little bit for me to comprehend how I could even do something like sort of accomplish the same thing with a more fluid regime.
Right.
Especially in the fitness space. But I think it's just a good example of how you can move from rigidity to adaptability, even in your own life, in something as simple and as personal as your own workout routine, not performance-based, just for health and wellness.
Right.
And that can go a long way.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the balancing act, again, of realism and idealism happening in real time. Prior to the injury, there was an ideal level of fitness that you were aspiring towards.
Right.
And then you got hit with the heavy hammer of reality. So that ideal has to change.
Yes.
And you recognize that.
Yeah.
Now, I think that's an important thing, because not everybody will recognize that. They'll think, no, I can still get back to it. I just need to work hard enough.
Yes.
I need to sacrifice everything to get there, depending on how badly they want the thing. But what if you recognize things have to change, so the ideal changes, and that then becomes, I have a solid level of GPP. At least I'm getting to the gym.
Yeah, that's right. The other thing is that I've got back more than I could have ever imagined. And I didn't consider this at the time. But even though, I acknowledged it and I didn't apply just grit, throw everything at this thing until I get there, which I think would have absolutely destroyed my body.
Sure.
The patience and being adaptive, it's taken a lot longer.
Right.
Years and years longer. But I'm actually still getting closer to that ideal again.
Right.
But the path looked way different.
Sure.
So sometimes you have to, you change the ideal, you change the order of importance of the things in your life.
Yep.
And sometimes it's just the path itself that changes.
Sure. Well, I mean, at the time, you had at least two that I can think of, very real reasons for wanting to be in peak physical form.
Yes.
You were a soldier.
Yep.
And you were a high-level athlete.
Yeah.
Now, when that's taken away from you, you get to decide, I have all of these resources available. is peak physical form really that important right now with all of the obstacles in the way?
Yeah.
Or can I now take all of that time and focus and energy and ability and put it elsewhere? And surely you have.
Yeah, and a lot of it by necessity, not by choice. And that's where the realism, I guess, comes into play. It's like I had to see the world as it was, not as I wanted it to be. If it was what I wanted it to be, it would look vastly different.
Sure.
And then it's becoming okay with what it is and not what I want it to be.
Right.
And I think that's also a huge part of this for a lot of people, is creating that ideal and then being sad that it's not that.
Sure. Well, they don't see an alternative.
Right.
You know, like if you, well, maybe it's an identity thing,
Sure.
you know, where you build your whole world around that outcome coming to fruition. And then when reality hits you, you're like, oh, okay, what next? I don't have a what's next. I never planned for this. And that's where adaptability comes into play. You can't plan for everything. But, you know, there's the hierarchy of wants and needs as well. It's a difficult thing for me because I don't think it's so black and white. It's being like, this thing's no longer on the table, and now I got to figure out what fills that void.
Well, I think in part this is where I think transferable everything can do a lot of good for people, and hopefully we can do a lot of good for people, in particular athletes. So like, you know, yes, there's the adaptability component, and as you rightfully put it, there's the identity component and that identity crisis. So for me, the thing was, when I look back on it, once, you know, it was pretty clear to me that I was not going to succeed in becoming a professional soccer player. But then I banked everything on that happening. I mean, I didn't pursue any schools. I didn't pursue any NCAA scholarships. It was all, I'm going to Europe and I'm going to try this. There's 0 doors left open for any post-secondary education. Threw everything at it. And then it failed. And then I was no longer going to be that. But my whole life had been focused on becoming a professional soccer player. I made every sacrifice imaginable for that to happen. And I think the cool part is, even though it felt at the beginning like I lost my identity, no longer being Daniel the soccer player, was that was the furthest thing from being true. Everything I became through that stayed with me. And as I adapted to the things around me, to the job change or the new sets of priorities, but I didn't have to adapt who I was. Who I was still building. I was still becoming stronger. I was still focusing on the virtues inside of me that I had. I didn't quite have the language for it. But that's what was kind of happening. And I think that's, if we tie this back to the beginning, that's where holding those virtues at the center of who we are and everything else is adapting around you. It's this nucleus of who we are, is that's not intended to change. That's intended to grow and build, but we adapt to all the other things. And I think that's the hardest part, maybe.
Yeah, there's something to be said about going all in on something in the way that you did with athletics.
Yeah.
What that thing is, I'm not sure.
Okay, well,
But
I've thought about it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about it in terms of having identity building or identity, evolution, and going all in on something. And if there are scenarios where you can do the one thing where it doesn't impact your life in the same way, but then you don't get the same benefits because there's not a driving force that's pushing you as hard. I can't say I've ever gone all in on something like that. I haven't built my life around, this is my goal, everything I do is going to be in an effort to reach this thing. I've had passions and things that I've worked very hard on, but I can't say that I've chosen one specific thing and dedicated that level of resource to it.
it's not always the right thing to do, of course,
Right.
right? Unless it's like, you have that burning passion in your heart. Like,
Sure.
I just want this more than anything.
Right.
And not having that, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
Right? Like, I don't know that I've experienced exactly that in the same way I did. I've had things that I've worked towards very hard, things I really wanted, almost as close to that, at least in my soldiering career. But that was kind of a partially unique experience for me,
Fair
and I know for most people. But there are some risks with it, or there can be.
Sure.
And that's why I think a lot of people struggle with those transitions, those big transitions where it consumed your identity. And it's why I see a big link between, like, say, soldiers, first responders, because often that's the case for them. They have to make such extreme levels of sacrifice within their lives in order to be good in that profession. It sort of mirrors that version of athletics. And so I think that's where I think transferable everything becomes a bit of a companion, where, like, I'm trying to be empathetic as a parent. Well, and I have this is true for my brothers, is because they're going through this, where they're putting everything on the line. They're going all in the same way that I did. And so if I'm thinking through the lens of a parent, that's fine that they're going to do that. I want to encourage them. But I also have to be a little bit cautious, because at the end, if it doesn't work, and statistics and probabilities say it's not going to, no matter how close you're getting to it, is that when that moment hits, there's a very unfortunate reality of crisis, of identity, of depression, of a lot of different mental health issues that can come downstream from that.
Sure. It's not, and even the loss of community.
Yeah.
We've spoken about some of what Sebastian Junger's written about.
Yeah, in Tribe.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all of those things converge into this, like, one big moment. Because it's not like this, in most cases, it's not this, like, gradual thing that happens. It's like, okay, here's the day I'm no longer this. 20 years led me to this, or 15 years led me to this, and now one day it's just no longer there.
Right.
But I think with transferable everything as a companion, as a way of thinking, and it probably requires coaching, education, and stuff like that, is that I feel confident with my brothers, for example, going all in and having some companion discussions about this, of, like, who you're becoming along the way is the thing that matters most.
Sure. And
sort of recontextualizing everything with sort of this philosophy of transferable everything. So, like, yeah, if things don't work out, who cares? Let's instead of imagining, sometimes you have to imagine what it's going to be like to walk into this professional stadium. Yeah. That's awesome too. But if we imagine the strength of the person you're going to become by going on this journey, that can still be the strength of the person in the stadium.
Sure.
And it can also be the strength of the person that's no longer wearing that uniform either.
Yep.
The strength is equal on both sides. And so that becomes a big part of the thing that you're working towards. And it gives meaning to the journey and the sacrifice and all the things you're doing. And that becomes a bigger part of the goal. Because if that is your goal, the strength of that person, well, you want to be a professional soccer player, professional athlete, the strength of that person needs to be monumental.
Sure.
If you want to survive it. And the strength of the person that needs to survive it not happening needs to be equally as strong as the person that can endure that career successfully and come out the other end dealing with the criticism, the tabloids, all of those things.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, as a companion, it's a different viewpoint, a different vantage, an additional lens where you can say, hey, I know you're all in on this, but you're developing thousands of competencies right now. Only 50 of them are specific to this sport.
Yeah.
So just now that you can see them, keep them in mind.
Yeah, that's actually a really great way of putting it. Is if we numbered the competencies, how many are directly applicable?
Right.
And the other ones are surplus for all of the other things.
For sure.
That's a beautiful way to think about it.
Yeah, and I mean, of those thousands of competencies, it's not to say that you and I are trying to tell the person who's living it which ones should be the most important to them.
Yes.
We can make suggestions. In our experience, at least all the ones that are going to show up in the book are pretty dang important.
Yeah.
But through experience and awareness, the individual will be able to decide which ones they feel need to be embodied the most.
And that's exactly it. There was a chapter that I just included last week. It's the final chapter included, resource management.
Nice.
Obviously, we'll talk about it as an episode, but really it's about selecting the right tool for the right job. And that's one of the things we don't want to do. I'm not telling you which tool at what time.
Sure.
And no one really can, and no one really should.
No.
It's like the conversation I had with a friend of mine when he first, so he's now actually read the whole manuscript.
Oh, nice.
Which is really cool. But originally when he read a couple chapters, his thought was, well, like first you have to tell everyone like what to believe, or like what to think. And I was like, no, it's the complete opposite of
Chairman Schultheis.
that. No, that's horrifying. It makes me want to vomit. It's about doing that for yourself, but learning how to think through it. Learning how to understand yourself and deciding for yourself which virtues you want to deploy at what time, what pieces of your character, and largely what's possible.
Right. Yeah, it's not to take away anybody's agency. If anything, I think it's letting them know they have more of it than they think.
Yes, exactly. And it's not even to say this is how courage should show up in your life.
Right.
This is how adaptability needs to work for you. It's
Right.
that this is what adaptability is. This is why it's fundamentally important. And this is how you can ask some important questions and think and reflect in your own life, in your own circumstances, and learn to ask questions of yourself that will help you arrive at a place where you can build out how adaptive you can be and learn when to apply it.